Today's goal is to learn how to use the inverse of the trig functions. The reason that you should be able to use the inverse is sometimes you are going to be asked to find the angle versus finding the sides. So using an inverse function looks like number 9 here. This x represents the missing angle in the triangle. This 0.9563 represents the ratio of the sides. So just like multiplication and division are inverse operations, meaning they undo one another, sine, cosine, and tangent also have inverse operations. And they look like this. The inverse of sine looks like sine with a -1 above it. The inverse of tangent would be tangent with a little -1 above it. So you could assume the inverse of cosine would have a little -1 above it. So these inverse functions allow us to undo the original sine function. So if I want to find x, I take the inverse sine and then I put in the ratio. So the inverse sine of 0.9563, and I would type that in to my calculator. On most calculators, you're going to use the second button, and you'll see that sine -1 just right above the regular sine button. I'm going to show this to you on Desmos. So if I go in here and I click, oops, that's not really working for me. If I go in here, and this is my Desmos app, this is the scientific calculator. So if I'm using Desmos, there's my original sine button. I can see that right there. But if I go over here to where it says FUNC, that stands for function, you'll notice that there's a sine button with a -1. That's my inverse sine button. So I would click that button, and then I would put in, so I'd have to go back over here to main, and then I would put in my 0.9563. So the inverse sine of 0.9563 would be 72.999. Now round, and 72.999 becomes 73 degrees. And that's how you find a missing angle using trig functions. So let's do another one. If I come down here to number 11, right, if I want to find w, I need to do the inverse of tangent. So I do the inverse of tangent, then put in the function, or sorry, the ratio. So if I go back to Desmos, I would now clear this, right, clear. And I'm going to go over to function, inverse of tangent, and then type in the decimal I was given. So 0.364. And I get, because really, I mean, do I have to put that 0? No. And I get 20.0015. So round that accordingly. So your missing angle W would be 20 degrees. Pause the video, do 10 and 11, or sorry, 10 and 12, and check back and make sure that you're getting the right answer. Number 10, you should have gotten B equals 39 degrees. And for number 12, W equals 6 degrees. Okay, so now we go to 2 more examples, and they're just written slightly differently. So in the first 4 examples, we were given the ratio as a decimal. Well, in these examples, we're given them as the fraction. You can use them the exact same way. Don't overcomplicate things. We would do the inverse sine, and then we would literally just put in the 5/3 into your calculator. So if I go over to Desmos, I'm going to clear all. I'm going to do the inverse sine. Now, on here, I don't see a fancy fraction button. So when I do this, I can type it in as 3 divided by 5. Because remember, all fractions are just division problems. So you can either use your fancy fraction button or you can type it in as 3 divided by 5. It's going to do the exact same thing. So we get 36.86. So let's round that up to 36.9. Right? Yep, 36.9. Okay, if we were to do part B, the exact same thing. So we have cosine, so we would do inverse of cosine of 4 over 7. And if you put that in your calculator correctly, you would get 55.2. So let's do one now where I actually give you the triangle. So I'm looking for question mark. So just like in the other types of problems, one of the first things you want to do is label your opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse to make sure that you choose the correct trig function. So if I'm trying to find question mark, this side would be the opposite of question mark, and this side would be the adjacent of question mark. So the trig function that uses both opposite and adjacent would be tangent. So tangent of question mark would equal 15 over 35. So how do I find tangent or question mark? I would do the inverse of tangent and do the inverse of 15 over 35. And I would leave things as a fraction to avoid any rounding errors. So I type that in my calculator and I find out that my missing angle is 23 degrees. And we're done. Let's do another. Number 15. We're going to first identify our pieces. So if this is question mark, this would be the opposite side. This would be my adjacent side. And this side, since it's opposite of the right angle, would be my hypotenuse. So in this problem, I'm given adjacent and hypotenuse. So the trig function that uses that is cosine. So cosine of question mark equals 21 over 44. So the inverse cosine of 21 over 44 is going to give me a missing angle of 61.5. Pause the video, do 16 and 17. You can do it. 16, you should have chosen sine. And solving this would have given you question mark equals 18.9 degrees. For number 17, you should have done the inverse cosine of 12 over 38, and you would have found that your missing angle is 71.6 degrees. Okay, and that's how you solve for missing angles using the inverse trig functions. Now, go get a snack, go take a break, because our next page, while there's only 4 questions, these questions have 6 parts each. So give yourself a breather, maybe go on to Math Excel and do just these problems before you go into the next notes section. If you're feeling good though, feel free to just keep watching. So page 174, the goal of this page is that given any 3 parts, you should be able to find all of the angles and all of the sides to every single right triangle given. So for each one of these questions, you're going to be looking for a capital A, a capital B, and a capital C. Capital letters always refer to angles. Now, if you recall, of these 3 angles, you will always know what C is because C is always marked with that 90 degrees. So this one will always be 90 degrees. You're also going to be looking for the sides, which will be labeled with a lowercase a lowercase b, and a lowercase c. So when you're trying to find all of the parts, you want to make sure that you know what parts you were given. So C is always given. I don't see any other angles there, So I can't fill out a capital A or capital B just yet. Now, I do see that across from angle A is 6.7, so that would be side A. So I am given that part. And then I am given the side across from C, but I'm not given B. So I start with these three pieces, and from these three pieces, I can find everything. Now, depending on how your brain works or which area of this you're most comfortable with, there are numerous ways that you could find the missing pieces. I'm going to try to show you a bunch of different combinations, but really do whatever makes sense to you or whatever you see. Now, when I look at this problem, the first thing that I notice is that I have 2 out of 3 sides. So if I have 2 out of 3 sides, I can use the Pythagorean theorem to find the third side. I don't even have to use trig. So to find part B, little b, I can do 6.7 squared, because remember, Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So 6.7 squared plus b squared equals 16 squared. And I can solve that like I did at the beginning of the unit. So I get 44.89 plus b squared equals 256. I'm going to subtract 44.89 from both sides. I get b squared equals 211. Take the square root and I get b equals approximately 14.5. Now I have all of my sides. So let me write that in there. So this one's 14.5. So now my goal is to find either angle A or angle B. Does it matter which one you find first? Absolutely not. I'm going to find A first just because. So since I have all 3 sides, does it actually matter what trig function I choose? No. I typically will choose sine just because that's like the first one you learn. So if I'm trying to find sine of A, I take the opposite of A, which is 6.7, over the hypotenuse, which is 16. And we just learned what's the inverse of sine? Inverse sine. So I do the inverse sine of 6.7 over 16, and that's going to give me A. Type that in, and I end up with A equals 24. It's 24.7557. So if I were to round that, I get that angle A is 24.8 degrees. Now, I could do this exact same thing for angle B. I could do sine of B and then do the opposite of B, which is 14.5 over the hypotenuse, which is 16. Could totally do that. The other way that I could find B is a little bit simpler. If you think back way back to the beginning of the year, we learned a fact about angles in a triangle. We learned that all of your angles, A plus B plus C, should add up to 180 degrees. So while you could do sine of B, blah, 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 you could also just do 180 minus the 2 angles that you have to find your missing angle, which would be 65.2 degrees. So like I said when I was introing this, there are numerous ways for you to find missing parts. If you like trig, you can use trig to find every single part. If you're not feeling super comfortable with trig, you can rely on things like the Pythagorean theorem or the triangle sum theorem to help you find missing pieces as well. Now I'm going to go through every part of number 19 as well. And then you're going to do 20 and 21 by yourself. These problems are going to take you a while. That's okay. There's no additional practice for today. There's just 10 Math Excel problems for you to do after this. If you need support, please let me know and we can schedule something for Friday. So let's walk through number 19. start with identifying what pieces I've given you. So we've got angles, we've got angle A, angle B, and angle C. So which of those did I give you? It looks like I obviously gave you C. That'll be 90 degrees every single time. And then angle B is 34. Out of the sides, let's see, this would be side C. I don't give you that, so that one's missing. But I do give you side B, which would be 7. And then it looks like A is also missing. So what do you notice? The first thing I noticed is I've given you 2 out of 3 angles. So can you find the third angle? You bet. 180 minus 90 minus 34 tells me that my missing angle is 56. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and even write that in there, 56 degrees. So to find A, B, and C, I'm going to have to pick a trig function, and I have to pick either A or B to use. Again, does it actually matter? No, it doesn't. So just pick one. I'm going to pick B. Why not? Let's work with B. So if I pick B, say that I want to find A. So this one would be opposite of B, and A would be the adjacent to B. So which trig function uses opposite and adjacent? Tangent. So tangent of 34 would give me 7 over A. So let's review how do you solve for A. You got to get it out of the denominator. So multiply both sides by A, and you're going to get A tangent of 34 equals 7. And then you've got to get rid of the tangent of 34. So divide both sides by tangent of 34. And you end up with A equals, put that in my calculator, and we get A equals 10.4. Now, what options do you have to find C? Option 1 would be to use trig function again. Okay, maybe I do the sine of 34, which would be 7 over C. And then I can use the exact same steps I did for the last part. So I'd end up with C equals 7 divided by sine of 34. And I get C equals 12.5. That is one way to find C. What's another way to find C? You could have used the Pythagorean theorem. You could have gone 10.4 squared plus 7 squared equals C squared. And you would have also found that C equals 12.5. Okay, so there's my final answers. Here's my final answers. Oops, wow, just drew through that. Sorry about that. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video now and work on problems 20 and 21. You might need a snack break, so go ahead and grab a snack or something cool, and then come back and do 20 and 21. Your answers for when you are checking your work, remember that lowercase are your sides. So number 20, your sides are 13, 10.2, and 16.5, while your angles are 52, 38, and 90. And then for number 21, your sides are 4 root 6, which is approximately 9.8, 5, and 11. And then your angles, remember C is always 90 degrees, so you don't even have to think about that one. And the other ones are 63 degrees and 27 degrees. Okay, go ahead and get your Math Excel problems done, and let me know if you have any questions.